Hi everyone, my name is Shri and I'm here with Victor Yi. Victor is the founder of Innova Youth, which is a global nonprofit that empowers students to be community changemakers by providing resources for research, collaboration, and communication. Is that correct, Victor?
That is correct. Yes. Thank you so much, Sri, for having me on. Yes, Innova Youth is a global education nonprofit. We teach three different skills that we think are lacking in high school, which are research, collaboration, and communication. And through workshops and summits, we really empower students to start their own social impact projects that they are passionately about.
Yeah, why do you think it's so important that we have like social entrepreneurs like in today's day and age?
Definitely. So the biggest thing is that because we live in the 21st century, our society is ever changing.
Mhm.
Technology is really getting us interconnected more than ever, and it's super important that we really can solve those vital issues that are going to stay prevalent in our lives, from climate change to social justice to mental wellness. There's so many different topics that one can explore, and the best thing is to kind of get exposed to them at an early age. So that not only are you really discovering your path and your interest into your careers, but also you get a better sense of who you are and what you want to be and how you're going to change the lives around you. And so that is
Mhm.
exactly why social entrepreneurship is here to stay, is to be able to give the platform and opportunity to students to really explore and really make that firsthand impact that they can.
Awesome. And like, how does like Unova Youth like serve that need of like empowering the youth and like provide these resources?
Definitely. So the first thing that we do is we hold workshops and summits. We do host them on four different categories, and they are civic engagement, global leadership, social responsibility, as well as Gen Z culture. So the first thing that we wanted to do is really expose them to different topics, right? Because a lot of what happens in school is that we see a lot of regurgitation of information, a lot of memorization of facts. And of course, as students are going through higher level courses, of course they're getting the information, but there is no application in which they can serve what they learn inside the classroom and actually apply it to outside
Mhm.
knowledge. So that is exactly where we kind of bridge that gap. So we talk about role models, we talk about confidence, we talk about social innovation. We kind of just really give the opportunity for them to kind of, get exposed essentially to all the different topics that are around the world. And then what we do is we mentor them through the process of getting their small project or initiative started. I know, one of the biggest stories that I have personally is kind of mentoring this 11-year-old student who kind of went to our workshop and at the end got a little bit emotional, started crying. And I kind of, felt sad. And I thought, maybe it was because like she didn't get our workshop because there were a lot of older kids or, maybe it was just like, we didn't speak well. So we did talk to her after. And it came to the realization that she was actually, emotionally crying because of the fact that she wanted to tell her story about being bullied because of her love of science as a middle
Oh,
school student. And so for me, that was definitely, a case of really getting the student empowered to actually speak up and give that voice. And so later on, a couple months after she kind of went to our workshop, she created an initiative at her school called Stand Up, which was like a confidence project. I ended up kind of connecting 400 students at our school together. All of the teachers became like a mentorship database from eighth graders helping sixth graders. So, I really do think that, as students really develop throughout their middle and high school years, that there are a lot of opportunity and platform for young
mhm.
students to actually enact change at a local level, but also think globally as well.
Yeah, and I think that's like an incredible idea because like when we go through high school or even middle school, like we get all these like informations and we're like constantly inspired by the different things we learn, but there is hardly enough resources to like say, okay, I have this great idea, like how do I get started kind of.
Definitely. And the biggest thing is that, there is never a bad idea because,
That's true.
you either, succeed or you learn from the experience. So, I definitely think that, there's so many avenues of exploration for students to dive into, and there are never any, I guess, barriers in the way as long as you continue pushing forward.
Awesome. And like how did you get started in entrepreneurship and kind of like what inspired you to start up Innova Youth?
Yeah, so my path to entrepreneurship may not be most conventional. It came from actually like a lack of frustration that everything that we're doing inside the classroom experience was just opening up our textbook, doing our homework, and not being able to apply everything that we are into like the real world. So, if we're studying biology, all we're doing is just like doing labs and then, going home and then studying and getting that, information into our brains. So we're just memorizing them. But what about like actually applying them to actual real issues in the world? We tend to not talk about climate change too much in the classroom experience. We don't talk about, how to actually, achieve solution-based ideas right now because there is no more time for us to just wait around and wait for us to become like actual adults and experts on
Yeah.
these issues. So it really starts with for me, just being able to empower others and realize that, I have the power to change the world in my fingertips right now. And it just starts, as soon as I really figure out who I really am. And so that's
Mhm.
when I kind of got into really, the nonprofit sector. And then, really kind of shown from there that I was able to get more opportunities, which I'm grateful for. But definitely it started from a lot of lack of frustration. And I'm sure that a lot of students feel the same way.
Yeah, I like definitely agree what you're saying about there's a lot of stuff. It's like the things that you learn in your textbook are not always applicable to the world. And what I found really frustrating for me was, as like a science nerd, I there's this disease called helminthiasis. You probably haven't heard of it, but it's just like a parasitic worm infection that infects like billions of people around the world, but no one knows about it. And it kind of goes to show like, wow, there's a lot of neglected diseases as well as like, and these are kind of debilitating entire developing nations, but like who's going to raise their voice and actually do something? So I can definitely relate with the fact that there's a lot of these issues that we learn about, but not necessarily like haven't like be able to implement an idea to solve them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So what do you think are some like skills that change makers or people who are social entrepreneurs should have? And like how do you build those skills?
Yeah. The first main thing that change makers should have is an open mind. I think, when
Yeah.
it comes to this field, it's ever changing. It's very flexible. There is no set way. Then there's no formula to actually get from ground zero all the way to the end product. So it really requires a lot of really exploration, I would say. Exploration on all fields, like doing your research, kind of figuring out like what is the problem that you're actually aiming to solve, actually getting like a feasible solution to it, and actually having those role models and those people that support you from the beginning. So it doesn't, at the end, you might get a lot of people that do not support your idea. You might get a lot of people that thinks that you're not old enough to actually solve those issues, but you must have that group base of supporters that are willing to support you throughout the whole entire journey and encourage you to think outside the box and go out of your comfort zone, right? Because a lot of the fact is that a lot of these adults actually want to hear from youth, as much as it does not seem. And you must kind of reach out and make those connections. Some people that you thought were like impossible to reach may not be that impossible, because as youth, like how many people are actually changing the world? It's only the slight like percentage of people. And so you really need to make your mark as someone that is not only passionate but ready to actually tackle those issues. And so I would say keeping an open mind, being an effective communicator is also super important. You need to know what you're saying, and really kind of convince others that you, out of all the collective young people, are the ones who represent them. Because at the end, being a change maker is really representing others and actually empowering others to become change makers, and not just yourself being a change maker. So getting the
Mhm.
ability to kind of go out of your comfort zone and say, this is who I am and how I'm going to inspire others to do the same as I am, is going to be super important.
Yeah, and like oftentimes when we're trying to inspire others, that like there is this level of self-confidence that we need to have within ourselves. So kind of speaking off of that, I think in like this day and age, we have so much pressure as young people, like with academics and like parental pressure as well as just like school. And so like how do we maintain that balance and maintain that self-confidence so we not only can balance the things that we're supposed to be doing, but also our like passion projects and actually making change?
Definitely. The first thing to realize is that these passion projects are going to stay with you for, the rest of eternity or the rest of
Yeah.
your life, right? The skills that you learn here are not going to just float away, or just like, when you memorize like information in the textbook, they don't just like go away after you finish taking the test or a quiz. Like these are essential life skills that as you go into your college life and as well as your career life, will continue to use and strengthen and reinforce. So I do want to say that, these passion projects are not going to be something that you just do as like a high school extracurricular activity. What I tend to tell a lot of people is that treat these like initiatives and these passion projects as a passion. Like do it as a hobby. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
these are not like, oh, 3 o'clock, time to do my ECs, time to go to my after school meeting.
Time to
Like
build up my resume.
exactly, exactly. Like there are so many more opportunities if you think about it in a different direction, because just like how like you might have a passion for traveling, or you might have a passion for sports. Like these are things that you're going to do for the long term, right? They're not going to
Mhm.
leap at any point in time. So it's definitely important to see that these are things that you're going to be building for the rest of your life instead of just short term success, because a lot of
Mhm.
the success that you're going to gain might not be tangible as of right now, right?
Yeah.
Because you might be kind of impacting local students, but at the end, this is like the stepping stone to actually getting you towards the change maker journey, which is
Mhm.
always ever I guess ever changing. So it's just really important to see that there's a lot of different opportunities out there, and this is the first step to actually
Mhm.
making that.
Yeah. Okay. And then kind of going off of that is that I see like a lot of high schoolers and also just people start up their own nonprofit organizations or companies, but they're not necessarily without a genuine intent. Does it necessarily matter the intent you start something new? Or is it just like the product of that company? Like what I'm saying is like a lot of kids just start up nonprofits for the sake of their resume and they don't really work out or they kind of like half work out. So like what have you seen as like the trend for this?
Yeah, I definitely see like a trend among a lot of young people that are, doing like I guess similar things. But the difference that you see is that, nonprofits are driven by not only the work that they do, but also the mission of the founders and the people that are working with them. So,
Mhm,
as long, even as if they're making tangible impact, what we're
mhm.
seeing is that we're always seeing like the long term. So, like sometimes like I do like kind of meet across these people, sometimes like they're there, but they're not really in for the long run. And you can tell, right? Just like
Yeah.
another person that, it might be kind of high achieving student in their classroom experience that might be doing a lot, but is aiming for a goal.
Mhm.
So I think that, the difference is that even though they might be doing the things and you might see that like, oh my gosh, like why are they doing the same thing that I'm doing? You might
Yeah.
have to, realize it and take it in a different spotlight because your goal is different from their goal because their
Yeah.
goal might be a short impact, like in 2 years I need to get here. Your
Mhm.
your goal is like I need to be a change maker. I need to solve the world's issues in about 10 years, right? So it's totally different that like they may be doing the same things now, but
Yeah.
after like 5 years, it's going to be like an exponential growth. So even though they
Yeah.
did this one thing and now they've gotten into the gateway to another chapter of their life, it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily translate to how they're going to actually continue that journey later on. So, there is not too much worry as long as you kind of place it upon yourself to see
Mhm.
who I really am and how am I going to take forward my opportunities so that, it's not like in the 2 years of high school, I'm going to do this, but actually in the 5 years, that
Yeah,
actually,
that definitely
there's a
makes sense.
bigger reflection out there.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the issues that like change makers are trying to solve, like they seem very big and large in scope. Like you said, like climate change and stuff. And it's very hard to like say, okay, I'm gonna do A, B, C, D to like solve climate change because it's such a big problem in scope.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of that fear of getting started is like something that's inhibiting a lot of like entrepreneurs to get started. So what do you suggest to overcome that and like better plan when you are like kind of starting up your organization?
Yeah. Well, the first motto that I would always say is to think globally and act locally first, right? It's like,
Mhm.
there are a lot of issues in the world. And the reason that people start is from ground zero and noticing that there's the existent problem in their own community, right?
Yes.
Because when you start in your own community, then slowly you can generate more connections, more expansion to other communities across near you. And, once you kind of start that process, it might be really slow at first and you might not see the results that you want to, but among like a number of years or a number of months, as long as you continue to do your work, people will notice, right? Like people will see you. When I first started my nonprofit, for the first year or so, I was working in a local area. So like for me, I live in Los Angeles. So I was kind of working in the Los Angeles area. By the time of that, I was like, done with like 2 years of working my nonprofit. We're now in like 14 countries, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting to see that like, you got to really have that perseverance and also that ability to see the long-term goals. So that like, I continue to prioritize that like, right now you might be doing things that might be tangibly like affecting the local level, but people out there are seeing what you're doing at your location and are wanting to replicate it in their location as well. So really take it as like a small step forward and actually kind of be really patient with the process. And I know that
Yeah.
like, later on you'll be able to kind of gain that long-term success.
Yeah. And throughout like your social entrepreneurship experience, I guess there has been like a lot of setbacks, I'm sure. So like can you talk a little bit about how you overcame those setbacks?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like a lot of the times, like when you see like I guess our nonprofit social media or personal social media, it seems like all it is like
Yeah.
glamour and the niceness. But there are so many setbacks that like have not been presented onto social media. The first time when I started my nonprofit, I had about 15 rejections from different various opportunities to even like speaking at a local library. I was rejected because I wasn't old enough to speak on topics. I went to my community, I guess the community center, also rejected. I went to local congressman, rejected. Like, I was just another 15-year-old. Like, what am I to do here? So I guess the main message I have to say is that there are always going to be people that are going to reject you, right? Because some people are resistant to change, which is
Mhm.
totally normal because, it's part of living a part of status quo. So part of being
Mhm.
an entrepreneur is trying to change the existing status quo, which kind of like reflects around how do you actually change those people's mindsets. So the real thing is to kind of get at it, right? Because like, you're always going to have people that are going to say like, I don't know, Shri, like, is that a good idea or not? Like, I
Yeah.
don't think so. Like, there probably are adults working on this, Shri, so let's just like go back to our studies. There are
Yeah.
people that are always going to say stuff like that, but I really do think that like, as you kind of show them what the progress is, people will
Hmm.
start to believe in you, right? I know, like, the community service manager at my community center allowed me to give one workshop and give you one chance. And she said, here's 50 spots, you better fill it up. And we
Yeah.
ended up at our workshop, we had about 150 attendees. So,
Wow.
it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting to see that, like, as you push forward and when you get people on board, the importance is to connect with people from all different ages. You don't
Hmm.
want just like a youth-led nonprofit, but you want youth-led with adult support, with adult backing. And I think that will really kind of get your journey across as like
Hmm.
more credible and also something that like is worthwhile to invest in.
Yeah, and like you've been talking about, like when you are bringing in people to help you out on your project, like what should we be looking for? Like obviously the first go-to people for us is like my best friend who has always been there and supported me. But are there like certain types of people that you should be looking for or try to recruit when you're trying to build a team?
Yes, yes, definitely. When I was looking for people on my team, I wasn't looking for particularly already like outstanding leaders because they
Yeah.
don't, need the growth. The biggest thing that I'm looking for is passion and also ability to grow from the experience. And
Hmm.
so that's how I kind of recruited some of my first students in the organization. They don't necessarily have to understand the issue,
Hmm.
but they have to be willing to kind of put in the work and actually get to the real, like, I guess the core of the issue, which is kind of like solving these kind of problems. And so it really deals with, you don't necessarily need the biggest leader out there. They can be a supporter, they can be an advisor and mentor, but don't put them on their team because, you want to be able to drive the whole, initiative and be able to speak, on different terms with your product and your team. So I would say like when you're choosing your team, choose based off of passion because that always hauls for the long term, right? When you have like people that are already like doing great things, they're going to
Hmm.
move on, right? Because their opportunities are endless already, and you might want to have the people that are at the bottom so that you really empower them so that they can actually empower others, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
core mission of this entire entrepreneurship process is that you're not only getting better, but you're making other people get better, so you gradually get better as well. So it's a whole collective, I think, group effort as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. And like throughout your like experience as well, has like you've like been able to like meet a lot of people and have a lot of experiences in travel. So like what is like a meaningful experience or lesson that you've learned like from someone else or like a certain experience?
Yes. The biggest lesson that I've learned is that like there's you got to just put your opportunity out there and shove your name and your face into so many different avenues, right? Like as scary as that might sound in the beginning, people don't realize like people don't like, there's a lot of people that don't know me, there's a lot of people that don't know you, but they're
Yeah,
waiting for someone to be out there, right? It's just like
yeah.
it's just the fact that like maybe social media hasn't connected us yet or like our path, has not crossed yet. So I would say the
Hmm.
biggest experience that I would have is that I had been representing the United States at a summit and a conference in India back in February,
Wow.
where I spoke about holistic well-being and innovative schools of the 21st century. And who was I to be there as like the youngest person there, and the next person was like 30 years old, CEOs, like board of education people, like a lot of governmental folks, and it was interesting to see that like they were actually trying to listen to what I was trying to say because everyone that they interact with are the experts, right? Everyone is
Hmm.
talking, everyone is already like done a lot of things in their experience, but no one really interacts with children or no one interacts with youth, especially
Yeah.
passionate youth that have been doing work for a long time. Right? They're
Yeah.
prioritizing people that are actually at the forefront trying to make things happen rather than like the people that are really like already at those positions. So don't
Yeah.
be afraid to kind of, connect yourself, like send those emails, like out of 100 emails, you might get like 98 rejections or so, but those two people are going to be really helpful and really important to you as you kind of go along that journey. So I would say like always kind of keep people, in your network, right?
Hmm.
Your teacher can be your network because your teacher might know someone that like suddenly like is going to connect you with another great person, and it's just going to lead down the cycle. So really just kind of take people at its heart and really get them to connect with you and understand like there are a lot of opportunities for it that you may not realize.
Yeah, yeah. And then also like when you are starting a nonprofit and you're trying to kind of like, I guess, is measuring the impact that you made a thing? Because I feel like oftentimes, of course, you started something for the sake of passion, but then you have this goal, and then it's like a never-ending process of trying to achieve a higher goal. I
Right.
don't know, it's like a hedonic treadmill kind of happiness thing, but I guess when you're sustaining a company or a nonprofit, what should you keep in mind?
The first thing that you should keep in mind is that original passion and that original mission, right? Like always go back to your mission, especially if we're working in a team. I know that like goals always revolve around like modifying the goals or modifying like the way that you're going to get to it, but the core foundation and the core thing that you founded your initiative by should stay stagnant and stay the same throughout the whole process. So I would say that impact is very hard to measure depending on like who is doing what and like what initiative that they're working towards, but I think impact is delivered by how you feel like you've done satisfactory work to actually improve a part of someone's life. Right. So
Hmm.
it can be the amount of people, it can be the amount of work, it can be the amount of, exposure to social media or awareness. Like there's so many ways to impact. But I think like the biggest thing is that like to be rooted in the fact that like, keep people affected and impacted on a level in which they have changed their life because of what you've done, right? Not like kind of like I've heard of this initiative that would not really count as impact, I would say, but as if like someone's actually like being I guess affected in another way is super important. So I would say that always kind of take the journey to heart as well, because it's a long journey. And I'm
Yeah.
not gonna sugarcoat that because it's definitely you have your ups and downs, but I would say like really have fun in the process too, right? Because at the end you're passionate about the work, which means that you're going to have fun with your work. And if you
Hmm.
treat it as a hobby, all the time you're going to have the amazing time of your life, right? It's not going to, it will be like a sudden like change in mindset because of the fact that you're working with your close people and you're going to be like doing amazing work, and at the end you'll see that it's going to pay off. So
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely right. And like, what are some of those types of like passion projects that like came out of Innova Youth that are like off doing their own thing?
yeah, so there's like anti-bullying initiatives. There's students that have started like mental wellness projects at their school and are holding assemblies talking about how to actually change the course of public education system so that they include more mental health counselors and nurses and whatnot. There are
Hmm.
students that have started like their own project sites of analyzing like presidential candidates like perspectives on climate change and actually like putting like I guess like the 1 to 5 like rating
Yeah.
system so people can actually understand like what policies they're actually enacting. So there are so many different things out there from like public speaking organizations that are motivating young children to actually like get to speak up and empower themselves. So there are so many different options and opportunities out there, and they're endless. And I would say really just focus on like what you think is going to help you kind of take to the next level. So like don't do something that like you see and like I guess like don't be part of the status quo, and like if you see like a million of like those same ideas, don't try to like enact that again, but actually like do something that you would see that like would be helpful to your own respective community, because I think that it's going to help in the long run to see that like you're differentiating yourself from the rest of the folks that are doing the exact same things with the exact same topics.
Yeah. And then going off of like actually implementing like your entrepreneurial idea, do you think innovation is more important or execution?
Good question there. I would say I think innovation is probably more important. I would say you really need to kind of believe in your idea in order for it to execute, because at the end,
Yeah.
execution can be done easily as right as well. As long as you have the right people in place, right? If you have
Mhm.
the facilitator as well as you have yourself and the people that support you, then you rally those together along with the attendees, then you'll be fine, right? But the first thing is to actually realize that like, is this idea feasible? And second of all, like, is it going to be sustainable in the long run? Because if it's
Yeah.
something that like you do and like 1 month later you have to like discontinue it, or it's paused, or you guys have to like get rid of the initiative, then there is no really real impact if it's not sustained for a long period of time. So I would say really continue to be creative, start to think about what others are doing, and I would say look at like those organizations and companies that are actually like being successful right now and see like what they've been doing, so you can implement something similar but about at like a youth level as well.
Gotcha. And like one of the other things that you're involved in is like civic action and activism. So can you tell me a little bit about working with the ACLU and stuff?
Yeah, so I think I had kind of gotten exposure to the ACLU, being like a delegate to one of their California advocacy institutes. And I had been working with a lot of students, mainly like towards advocacy, I would say, over activism, because I
Hmm.
would like to see that like for me, like active advocacy to me means like working with the existing people that actually are powerful and are really sitting at the seats ready to change the way that we live our lives. And
Hmm.
so I ended up starting like a national civic organization called Coalesce 4 that is
Hmm.
allowing students to actually redefine how they actually can help people re-elect their positions for the 2020 election, as well as get people to be to be registered to vote as well. I think
Hmm.
for me, one of the biggest problems that I saw when it comes to voting and registering to vote is that like we have the same like high schoolers go to their high schools and start, like helping people like get the campaign and like, get people to
Yeah.
vote. But again, it's not sustainable because,
Mhm.
like the one student does it, but like the next year, like, like they leave. And so I wanted to have like a more consistent way of actually getting students to register to vote so that, they have a better sense of like who actually they're voting for and what issues they're actually trying to solve. So I think that, in the end, when you kind of, I guess like it's really interdisciplinary in all senses in time because, like when you work on like STEM or, advocacy or history or English, like, they're all different avenues,
Yeah.
but in a sense, like they all lead up to the exact same thing, which is changing the way that students are and parents and youth are living. So I would say that like, definitely explore your passions on all different levels and
Yeah.
forefronts because you never know where one thing will take you far. So definitely just take that to mind as well.
Yeah, and I like also can relate to that experience about like making everything so interdisciplinary because even in like the science issue I was talking about earlier, there's so much policy and international affairs to actually kind of shift that, and that kind of makes you realize the importance of like, oh, all the other subjects I didn't like are actually really important in like building anything efficient and something new.
Definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah. And so, kind of winding down, if you had like an ideal vision for what the world should be or what people should be, what would it be? This is a tough question, I know.
Okay. Okay. I definitely want every single young person to be civically engaged in some level of some sort. So if there were, opportunities for students to really talk with their congressman, like, I want, students to really be more active than like, just joining like a student club organization or
Hmm.
really just getting involved and volunteering in the community. There's so much more that you can do. And there's so much power that like you can invest in yourself that you may not
Yeah.
even realize at this point in time, right? Because, you've probably seen like, there are a lot of young people at the news and are doing great things on a much wider global scale. But there's so
Hmm.
much that you can do at a community level that can change like this landscape and the policies that drive your city. So I think like I would love to see more young people really doing the things that they love and doing the things that they care about. Because for the long term, like what you're doing right now is going to help you for the career, right? Not just for college,
Hmm.
right? Because college is going to be like a cycle of exploration as well, where you're
Yeah.
developing these core skills that are going to take you so far, whether that's the research that you're doing, the connection that you're
Hmm.
making to young people and also the adults that are actually making the influential decisions, or just connecting with the rest of the world, right? Because at the end, we have to get ourselves competitive for the global economy in any year now. So like we really
Yeah.
need to kind of start heading it at a young age. And so I would just love to see if every person was involved at some sort of time and in being really, and actively like a change maker in general.
Yeah. And finally, like, what's next for you? Is it bridging off of Innova Youth, or are you starting something new? Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is I love exploring and just getting to, be more exposed to different other subjects as well. So I know that I'll be definitely continuing in Innova Youth. Thankfully, like I've gotten a lot of experience and opportunities to really explore further. So definitely we'll be kind of expanding more to different countries, really meeting with other like government officials to see like how we can actually get our nonprofit to be at a bigger scale, than it is right now. But in
Mhm.
general, I would say that just kind of exploring, right, like on all costs, right? If there's like an internship opportunity available, just take it. Even if like you have no experience with it, like apply for everything. Definitely just get your name out there because you never know like if someone like sees it and says, like Shri, like I think like I've seen her passion and her interest. Let's kind of take her in and team and see how we can actually get her to increase her skills in this particular area. So for me, it's a lot about like diving into my nonprofit personally, but also doing a lot of self exploration. So taking a lot of other opportunities, sitting on different advisory boards currently for
Mhm.
a couple organizations, and just being able to expose myself to more cultures and more people. So that's kind of where I'm planning as of right now.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Victor, for being on this podcast. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.